Hello again. So this week we'll be reading chapters 8 through 10 of I Am Malala. As always, if you haven't pulled up the quiz yet, go ahead and pull up the quiz because as we read along, I'm going to stop at each question so you can answer them. So we'll go ahead and get started. Chapter 8. No one is safe. My father replied to the Taliban the next day in a letter to the newspaper. Please don't harm my school children, he wrote, because the God you believe in is the same God they pray to every day. You can take my life, but please don't kill my school children. His letter appeared in the paper, along with his full name and the address of our school, even though my father had written only his name. Our phone started ringing that night. Friends called to thank my father for speaking up. You have put the first stone in standing water, one said. Now many will have the courage to speak up. But not many people did. My father had always been a busy man, participating in mushaira, poetry concerts, working late at school, helping neighbors settle disputes, but now when he left home, I felt like that 3-year-old I once was, when he would climb down the ladder at school to fix the well. I wondered each night if he would come back. So question number 1, what does the word mushaira mean? And remember, in the back of your book, on page 213, is actually a glossary. So back here with the gray edge line, or edge pages, is a glossary, so you can look up some of these words. But if they're not in the back of the book, you can go ahead and Google it and copy and paste the definition from Google into your Word or your Google form. So you're more than welcome to use Google as well, but I highly encourage you to use a glossary too. So we'll keep going. After the letter arrived, my father made a decision. The boys at the Kushal school would no longer wear the uniform of shirt and trousers. These supposedly Western clothes marked them as identifying with infidels in the eyes of Fazula's followers. So, for their safety, he had the boys switch to the traditional tunic and pants of the shalwar kameez. I still wore my blue and white shalwar kameez, but the Taliban said girls should not wear the white shalwar. The uniform I once loved now made me feel like a criminal. Suddenly, everywhere I looked, the Taliban seemed to sprout like weeds. Question number 2. What made Malala feel like a criminal? What made Malala feel like a criminal? Answer that, and we'll keep going. Then I thought, what have I done wrong that I should be afraid? All I want to do is go to school, and that is not a crime. That is my right. Besides, I was the daughter of Zwaudin Yousafzai, the man who dared to talk back to the Taliban. I would hold my head high, even if my heart was quaking. That fall in October 2007, something happened that gave us hope. Benazir Bhutto, who had been the first female prime minister of Pakistan, was returning to run in that year's election. Question 3. What happened in October of 2007? What happened in October of 2007? We'll keep going. She had been living in exile in the United Kingdom since I was 2 years old, but I had been hearing about it for years. As a woman, she was a role model for girls like me, and she was the only politician who'd had the courage to speak out against the terrorists. Our whole family was glued to the TV when her arrival was broadcast. We watched her weep as she stepped onto Pakistani soil for the first time in almost 9 years. My mother was moved by this, but was also afraid for her. She said to the TV, "Did you come for death?" Everyone knew it was dangerous for her to return, but we hoped for her safety. Not long after that, just over 2 months later, she was dead. It happened right in front of my eyes as I again watched her on TV. We will defeat the forces of extremism and militancy with the power of the people, she declared. And she stood on the seat of her bulletproof vehicle to wave to her supporters. There was a crack of gunfire and the roar of an explosion. I watched, breathless, as she sank down inside the car. My mother, my father, and my grandmother burst into tears. Benazir Bhutto was the first woman attacked by the terrorists. Despite the fear we all felt for her, we were not expecting them to attack a woman. The killing of women is prohibited by the Pashtunwali Code. We were shocked. Question number 4. What is prohibited by the Pashtunwali Code? What is prohibited by Pashtunwali Code? I found myself oddly still. My first thought was this. If Benazir Bhutto can die, no one is safe. No one was safe in Pakistan. Not the women who were forbidden to walk the streets of their own towns. Not the men who were being flogged to death for petty reasons. Not the children who worked in the trash heap. Not even children like me who just wanted to go to school. As I looked at the TV, a tiny voice in my heart whispered to me, "Why don't you go there and fight for women's rights? Fight to make Pakistan a better place." I had recently done interviews with the TV news channels Dawn and Khyber News about girls' education, and although I had been nervous, I had made it through, and I had liked it. As everyone around me cried, I kept my secret. I told myself I will continue this journey of fighting for peace and democracy in my country. I was only 10, but I knew then that somehow I would find a way. Chapter 9. Candy from the Sky. One day in the autumn of 2007, we were sitting in class when we heard a fearsome roaring from outside. Everyone, students and teachers, ran out to the courtyard and looked up. A swarm of giant black army helicopters darkened the sky overhead. They whipped the wind around us and stirred up a storm of dirt and sand. We cupped our hands over our ears and tried to yell at one another, but our voices were drowned in the din. There was a plunk as something hit the ground at our feet. Plunk, plunk, plunk. We screamed, and then we cheered. Toffees! The soldiers were tossing down candy to us. We laughed our heads off as we went scrambling to catch toffees. We were so delighted that it took us a minute to understand what was going on. The army had come to rescue SWAT from Fazlullah. We cheered and clapped and jumped up and down. Candy was falling from the sky, and peace would be coming to SWAT. Soon soldiers were everywhere. Helicopters were even parked on the Mingora golf course. It was strange to see the army and SWAT. We'd been praying for someone to stand up to Fazlullah and his men with their black turbans and Kalashnikov rifles. But now our town was swarming with men in green uniforms and Kalashnikov rifles. Practically overnight, Fazlullah's men disappeared, like snow melting into the ground. But although we could not see them anymore, we knew they had not gone far, only a few kilometers away, and Mingora remained a tense and frightened city. Each day after school, my brothers and I would race home and lock the doors. No more playing cricket in the alley, no more hide-and-seek in the street, no more candy from the sky. One evening we heard an announcement from the loudspeakers atop the mosque. The army had imposed a curfew. We didn't know what this word, curfew, so I knocked on the wall to Safina's house so someone next door would come to the hole in the wall and explain. Question number 5. What does the word curfew mean? And this one is not in the back of the book, so you'll have to Google it. So Google it, copy and paste the definition, or retype the definition, whichever way you want, and then we'll keep going. Soon Safina and her mother and brother came to our house and told us it meant we had to stay indoors for certain hours of the day and always at night. My brothers and I were so scared we didn't even come out of our rooms. We stayed inside and peered through the curtains at the empty street in front of our house. That night a streak of bright white light flashed across the sky, lighting the room for a second, like a flashbulb on a camera. Boom! A thud shook the ground. I jumped out of bed and ran to my parents. Kushal and Atal came running to join us. We all huddled together, shaking. The dishes clattered, the furniture shook, and the windows rattled. Then within minutes, the army's gunfire began in the outskirts of the city. With each blast and shot, we gripped one another harder until we drifted off to sleep. The next morning, we woke up as if we were coming out of a long, fitful dream. After a night full of bombing, the air seemed oddly still. We dared to hope. Was it possible that the army had defeated the Taliban? We peeked out the gate and saw knots of people from the neighborhood gossiping. My father went to find out what had happened. He came back inside frowning. The rumor on the street. The Taliban were going to take control of SWAT. The military operation was ineffective. Our hearts sank. The army sent 10,000 more men, and the fighting raged on, night after night, for a year and a half. Now we can answer question number 6. How long did the military fight the Taliban in SWAT? How long did the military fight the Taliban in SWAT? I was always the first to run to our parents, and my brothers quickly followed. And since the bed was now too crowded, I had to sleep on a pile of blankets on the floor. Even in the middle of a war, I was able to be irritated with those two for stealing my spot. Strange as it sounds, we got used to the bombing and shelling. Sometimes the tall slept through it, and Kushal and I came up with a system to figure out where the fighting was. If the fighting was nearby, the electricity went out. If it was further away, the power stayed on. There were 3 types of attacks, and we learned to distinguish them. Bombing was done only by the Taliban, sometimes by remote control, but other times by suicide bombers. Shelling from helicopters and cannons fired from mountaintops was the army. The 3rd type, machine guns, was used by both. I used to get afraid at night, especially during bomb blasts. From my spot on the floor in my parents' room, I recited a special verse from the Holy Quran, the Ayah al-Kursi. Say it 3 times and your home will be safe from devils and any kind of danger. Say it 5 times and your neighborhood is safe. Say it 7 times and your whole town is safe. I said it 7, 8, 9 times, so many times I lost track. Then I spoke to God. Bless us and protect us, I'd say. Bless our father and family. Then I'd correct myself. No, bless our street. No, our neighborhood. Bless all of SWAT. Then I'd say, no, bless all of Pakistan. No, not just Pakistan. Bless all the world. I tried to plug my ears and picture my prayers floating up to God. Somehow, each morning we awoke safe and sound. I didn't know the fate of all the other people I'd prayed for, but I wished for peace for everyone, and especially peace for SWAT. One day my prayer was answered. The army hadn't won, but it had at least driven the Taliban into hiding, if not away. So, question number 7. How would you feel to live in a war zone, a place that had bombings, fighting, military all over the streets, and men with guns outside your house? So you're going to restate the question, and then tell me your answer and why. So restating the question could sound something like, I would feel afraid to live in the war zone because, or I would feel uncomfortable to live in a war zone because. So give how you would feel with that restating the question, and then give your answer and why. Okay? And then we'll move on to chapter 10 in the next video.